Hello, my name is Jeff Holiday, and today we're going to talk about mental illness. Now, usually on my channel, I like to have fun, even if I'm debunking something that's notoriously bad or dangerous, could harm children. Generally speaking, I try and come at it with a very light heart, and every now and then I have to make a serious video, and today is going to be one of those days. So recently a viewer wrote me a letter, and they wanted to know more about me, more about the things that I believed, maybe some of my own experiences, and specifically when it came to mental health, because they themselves had experienced some troubles in the past, and they were wondering if I had as well. And this isn't something that I've actually talked about really at all on my YouTube channel, but I'm willing to talk about it now, and for a few important reasons. So I saw that there was a video that came out today, the day that I'm recording this, from PewDiePie. And I also noticed that this was Mental Illness Awareness Month. And so I figure this is probably as good a time as any to broach the topic and to share basically my story and some of the things that I've experienced and some of the people that I have known. So my story begins when I was 14 and my family had moved to Panama, Central America. And this move was really difficult for me because I went from a small town on the coast of Oregon, really not knowing any other type of culture except for redneck culture, and being suddenly in a developing but still in many ways third world country, not having any friends, not even speaking the fucking language, And it was hard on me. It was really hard. Couple that with the raging hormones of being a 14-year-old kid in high school, it was just a recipe for fucking disaster. So as you can imagine, it was not always easy, but at times it got even worse. You see, my parents bought into the belief, I guess you could call it the trope at the time in the mid-90s, that kids who were troubled needed to be medicated, and strongly medicated. And so I was pretty much always at risk of getting medicated in one way or another, or being treated like I have some severe disorder. And I'm not going to lie, I did have quite a bit of teenage depression. But as I reflect on it now, trying to understand whether or not I had just a bad set of circumstances that made my angst and my sadness and my loneliness turn into depression, or whether the depression was something that was chemically happening inside of my brain, I can't really say for sure. But it was rough. I did make friends when I was in Panama. I had lots of wonderful people that I could talk to, but for some reason, nothing seemed to make a dent. I was always sad. I was always feeling like an outsider. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. I felt like the things that were important to me were not important to anybody else. I felt alienated. I had uncontrollable anger about things that really didn't even matter, but I didn't know any better. I didn't have any skills to be able to cope with these strong emotions that were flooding through me. And I think that this is something that a lot of people can relate to. Everybody handles this type of stress differently, and everybody has varying degrees on how much they're able to get through it relatively unscathed, or whether or not it's going to take them for a ride that will last a while. And for some people, it lasts forever. Now, the circumstances by which I came to be medicated are really interesting. I tried to find healthy outlets and ways to deal with my extreme emotion, my mood swings, and they didn't work too well. A lot of it was music. A lot of it was listening to very aggressive, very loud music, isolating myself. I was online at the time. This is 1996. I was trolling in MIRC chat rooms, visiting rotten.com, the usual kind of shit back then. And my mother stumbled upon me. I'd already been mouthing off to her and being terrible. I was honestly really terrible to my mom, and she was a sweet woman, but she just didn't really understand. Another thing to make mention is my mom had me when she was in her late 30s, so she was very, very far removed from understanding what it was like to be a kid. It had been a long time since she had been a kid. She had me in 1982, and if I'm not mistaken, she was 36 at the time. That sounds about right. On the advice of one of her friends who had had a rebellious teenager, she took me in to go see a specialist, and it was a military psychologist who ended up testing me, putting me through a whole long series of questionnaires. I had to meet 3 times a week for 2 weeks to get fully evaluated. And my diagnosis at first was ADD and depression. And so they prescribed to me first Ritalin, and that was, it didn't really do anything for me. It didn't make me feel better. It didn't help me concentrate. In fact, it just kind of gacked me out a bit. I don't really think I was terribly ADD. I think that I think about it now, I think I was just really bored. I was really bored at school. And it wasn't very challenging for me at the time. I had been in advanced classes all the way up until high school, and then I get to high school, and there are no advanced classes at the military high school. There was just the basic curriculum, and I was bored. I had already done all of this stuff before. And so I was on the Ritalin for a while, and it just didn't do anything for me. And my depression started getting worse, and I started lashing out even more. So they prescribed Prozac for me. And Prozac just made me feel a little bit like a robot, and I didn't really like it. I didn't like it at all. But at the time that they prescribed me Prozac, I started having to go see a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, it didn't work very well. The psychiatrist would ask me questions like, do you hear voices? And I'd ask, well, what do you mean, do I hear voices? And the psychiatrist would say, well, do you hear voices inside your head? Do they speak to you? And I'd say, well, when I'm thinking about things, I think about things like I'm having a conversation with somebody, and my mind asks something and my mind replies. But I think it's just me. I think I'm just having a conversation with myself to figure out what I'm supposed to do or how I should feel about something. This proved to be a very large mistake on my part, ever saying anything like that to a psychiatrist, because he diagnosed me with schizophrenia. Yeah, schizophrenia. And I was not schizophrenic. I was a confused young man being pumped full of chemicals while I'm trying to go through puberty and trying to figure out how to be happy in a foreign land that I didn't really understand, trying to deal with feelings that I didn't understand, trying to deal with changes in my body that I didn't understand. And so they prescribed dizipramine for me. If you ever want an interesting read, go look up dizipramine. It's pretty fucked. Now, to make matters worse, on top of all of this, I have the genes. I'm really hoping that my kid gets my wife's skin and not mine. But I had horrendously bad acne. I mean, fucking terrible. To the point where you could see my pulse in my skin is just so raw and just covered in pimples. So I have all these body image issues as well, feeling like a pizza face, feeling ugly and unattractive. And I was a nerd and a loser in elementary school and middle school, but during high school I was one of the bad kids. You know, I was smoking during lunch break, and I hung out with those bad eggs. Those bad kids, bad influences. And they were fine. They weren't like troublemakers or anything. They were just the bad kids. And so while I get prescribed this dizipramine, I'm also having to take this shit called Accutane. And Accutane is fucking brutal. It's rough shit. It's a very specific amount of treatment that you take, and it dries out your skin so bad that huge chunks of your skin will fall off. It'll dry up in these huge patches and fall off. My lips were split like 30 times all at once, so it looked like I was wearing black lipstick because of the scabs all over my mouth. I woke up every morning feeling hungover because my body had no moisture in it. Now, the good part about the Accutane was at the end of it, I can't really get acne. Not really. Every now and then a little bit. I actually have one hiding right here that you can't see right now, but it's rare, and I rarely get pimples. So that worked, but going through that while I'm on a drug like dizipramine, which caused me to hallucinate. It didn't do anything for the depression. It didn't do anything for being able to focus in school. Instead, it made me high. It made me trip balls. And so this lasted for about 2 weeks, and eventually I had to flush the pills. And I swore that I would never go back on them. I swore I would never go back to another psychiatrist. I would never go back to another psychologist, and I would never be put back on a medication. Now let's talk about the worst parts. The worst parts about all of this was what was going on while I was trying to be treated, because I would beg and plead my mother, please don't make me take medications. Please don't make me take these pills. And I would get a very serious, concerned look in my mother's face, and she would say, take these pills if you love me. And I know now that she only did it because she thought that I was in such a crisis, and she had been told that this was the only thing that could be done. This was the only avenue of being able to save the situation was through pharmacology. So I don't blame her for it, but I did have resentment for her for a very long time. A very, very long time, and it took years for me to get over it. In fact, there was actually at one point, I was scaring my mother so much because I was acting out and I was just being... I was out of control. That she thought, her being a very religious, devoted Lutheran woman, she thought I was possessed by the devil. And she grabbed me and she shook me. She screamed for the devil to get out of my body, to leave her son alone. And I look back at these things now like I'm watching a movie, you know. I'm so detached from it at this point. It was, 19 years ago. And I think back to that, and all I can think of is how bad I feel for my mom to have been put in such a situation like that, that's the only thing she thinks she can do. So scared of the behavior and so detached from that type of behavior, that type of experience, that she thinks I'm possessed by the devil. And the only way to cure me of this crippling depression is to pump me full of drugs, I feel bad. I feel bad for my mother now. I mean, for me, at the time, I thought it was the worst thing that I had ever experienced. But now I know that getting through it helped to build my character, to forge the person that I am today. And that sounds like an easy answer, but it's not. I still had to experience it. I still had to go through it. But still, like, after all of this time, now I just feel so bad for my mom. It's really strange. Did I ever have suicidal thoughts? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot, actually. I had suicidal thoughts quite a bit. I had suicidal thoughts when I was going through the treatment options. I had them before I had the treatment options. I had them for years after I stopped taking the medication. It took a long time for me to find a way to be happy. And even after I found ways to be happy, there were points in time in my life where everything came crumbling down. I'm trying to keep my alcoholic girlfriend from jumping into some random junkie's lap and making out with him. So when we get home later that night, she beats the shit out of me and kicks my face so hard she almost breaks my eye socket with her steel-toed boots. And suddenly, that bad night happens. And a series of bad nights followed, which led to a series of bad months. Probably about a bad year. And when that type of thing happened, all those horrible feelings that I had managed to defeat years and years ago, it all came flooding right back. All the pain, all the sadness, all the crazy things that I had experienced, poked and prodded by fucking doctors. We toured a mental ward once because I almost had to go in one. That was fucked up. After a long time, a long time, I found a way to get through it. And I found a way to make myself happy on my own terms. And in that way, after all the things that I suffered, being able to find a way to live and to be a happy and complete and very, I'd like to say, very concrete and self-assured person that I am today, it took a lot of work, a whole lot of work. And it wasn't easy, and most of the time I didn't even know that I was doing it. But I did, and I came out of it okay. But there's a lot of people out there, they suffer from these types of things, and it's not just crippling, it can sometimes end up being fatal. life is not easy, especially when you're young, and especially when there's just something inside of you that makes it so hard to find a way to be content, or so hard to find a way to deal with the things that haunt you. Sometimes it's a past trauma. Sometimes it's something that was horrible that was done to you, or they had to endure, or you had to witness, and it just stays with you, and it stays with you forever. And it can take a long time to get over it, and sometimes people don't. Sometimes they never get over it. Sometimes the best you can hope for is just finding a way to live with it. Sometimes that's all you get. And that's because life is indiscriminate. The universe does not revolve around our desire or our deserving of being happy. It's up to us to try and be happy. Not always everybody's going to win that lottery. But I will say that the pursuit of it, the attempt of it, is worth it. Because for every dark thing that I've had to go through, and there's a lot more than just my own experiences with mental health, there's lots of tough things that have happened to me, happened to my loved ones, that I won't talk about today. But for every horrible thing that there was, there's a million more that are beautiful. And I came out of it with this sometimes obnoxious optimism about life. But I think the big one always comes down to suicide. And I've had a few friends decide that they were done. Decide that was it. And it's a horrifying thing to find out that somebody that you loved just decided to cease, decided to give up. I'd like to share one with you before I wrap this up a little bit. This was Avery. Avery was a friend of mine. We were very close for a while. And when you first met a girl like Avery, you kind of had a tendency to think to yourself, this one's not going to last very long. You kind of had a sense that Avery was not long for the world. We really didn't want that to be the case. She had been hooked on some bad stuff in the past. Her arms were covered in scars. She was a cutter, trying to find any way to relieve the pain and the tension. She had fallen into every bad thing you could think of. We tried to help her out. We gave her shelter for a time. She lived with us for a little bit. We tried to do everything we possibly could. But in the end, ultimately, we reached the limit of how much we were able to help her. And then she went and was living with people who didn't want to help her, who wanted to have more people like themselves around to justify their own using of hardcore drugs like heroin. You fucking name it. And in the end, Avery went back in one last-ditch attempt to try and basically save her own life. She went back to go and live with her parents in the Midwest. And it didn't work. And Avery left. Avery left forever. She was a good artist. She's a beautiful young woman. She could be smart when she wasn't being dumb, you know. I feel like there was a lot of care, a lot of compassion, a lot of love that woman could give someone. If she could have just given up the things that hurt her so bad, not just the drugs, but just her own perpetual spiral of depression, anxiety, being haunted by the horrible things that were done to her when she was young. But she couldn't move past it. And I think that maybe she could have moved past it. Maybe she could have found a way to not just live, but probably be happy if she'd found the right kind of help. You know, mental health talking to somebody, a psychiatrist, support groups, that's not always the best course of action for everybody. But sometimes it is. And you never really know until you try. And Avery, she didn't try. She didn't want to try, I don't think. She wanted to be independent. Because in the past, she had leaned on people, and those people had not only taken advantage of her, but some had severely abused her. And she didn't trust people. All she ever really let people see was like the surface Avery, the party Avery, you know, the I'm fun and crazy and sexy Avery, you know. And it was only a rare few, and I'm lucky I got to be one, that got to see that she was a real person underneath. But she didn't try. I really don't feel like she tried everything she could have. And I feel like the world is a dimmer place because she left. And I feel that way about everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. Human life is the most precious and unique and advanced and incredible things that we know of in the known universe so far. Every person has the capacity for such amazing brilliance. Our hearts are capable of just as much compassion and love and altruism as we are hate and aggression and alienation. There's so much potential in each and every single person. And it's a shame when somebody can't manage to break free of the things that haunt and torment and pain them, so that they can really see that they can see what they are capable of. So I urge you, to everybody, if you're sad, if you have persistent depression, if you feel alienated, you feel alone, it gets better, but you have to try. If you're a young person and you're going through high school, or you're just freshly out of high school, and you feel these heavy feelings, you feel this overwhelming weight pressing down on you, it does get better. Life actually gets better the older you are. That's a little secret, but it's true. It's totally true. The older you get, the easier life gets. Everything starts just making more sense, except music. You get the old person, like, I don't get today's music kind of shit going on. But other than that, everything else, life just gets better. It just gets better. It gets easier. You understand things better. And even if you feel alone, and even if you feel isolated, you find ways to live with them. You find ways for your life to get better. You find ways for it to improve. And really you should, because everybody is capable of amazing things. Everyone is beautiful in some way or another. And don't ever, ever, ever let something snuff out that which makes you special, that which makes you you. Find that thing. Fiercely hold on to it. Who cares if it's silly or it's stupid? Who cares if nobody gets it? Just do it. Embrace it. And find help if you need it. I'll have links down below. If you feel like there is nothing left for you, if you feel sad and you're at the end of your rope, then seek out help, please. Because all of us lose if you go away.